This is the Wikipedia page for Sid Meier's Civilization 4, which was released in 2005 for Windows XP primarily. Like Civilization 3, it would also run on Windows 2000. You could also get a Mac version from 2006. It was Mac OS X only, but that's understandable given that Mac OS IX was no longer in development at that point. It was also offered on Steam, which as far as I know is in 2014, although somebody may have a more accurate date. And I have the Steam page here, just to quickly look at it. I note that its reviews are, for the most part, the most positive of the series. We'll see if we can get the series generally here. At least the reviews are the most positive of what's available on Steam. So they say mostly positive. Oh, there we go. You have to get the pop-up. So 91% positive in the user ratings. I know the Metascore is a bit higher. That's one detail I'm leaving out. So, overall, the ratings for the game are 91% positive. So if we look at Civilization 3, 88%, still very good. Well, 5 has maybe come up. It wasn't actually that high earlier. I might be confusing it with the Metascore. It might also be that people are giving it more positive reviews in response to all the problems with Civilization 6 that are fairly recent, basically the last few months. Because Civilization 6 has had a really rough time of it. I'll cover that in a later video. Yeah, see, only 68% positive, and a lot of that had to do with the so-called red shell scandal, if you were following that. But anyway, it could be said that 4 is at least very, very popular. It was, until recently, the most highly rated one. I'm not sure why the rating has dropped. They do note that the Mac version's online multiplayer is no longer supported. I don't know why that is. If we wanted to look at changes, you can kind of see in this picture, although it's not overwhelmingly obvious, that Civilization 4 was the first version of the Civilization series to actually use a 3D games engine. Obviously, Civilization 3 attempted to look like a 3D game when in reality it was all sprites. So they used the GameBryo game engine. And the idea was it also, in addition to providing 3D graphics, made the map editor support Python. They provided a Steam SDK to make it easier to do modding. In general, modding was more supported in this version of Civilization than any previous one, although actually there are editors available for 1 and 2 that are pretty easy to use. Really, all the Civilization series are nicely designed for editing. Note that the project this time was actually directed by Sid Meier himself, which might explain why it's so well received. Soren Johnson was the game designer, officially, as well as the programmer. You can see that the music composer was Jeffrey Briggs, along with Christopher Tin. Now, the narrator was actually Leonard Nimoy, surprisingly enough, because in Civilization 4 they began reading off quotes from history about different subjects, whether they were really relevant or not. You could criticize that some of the quotes were out of context and didn't make any sense, but Leonard Nimoy's narration did add some depth to it, some interest to it. The AI was somewhat improved as well. So what that meant wasn't simply that it was harder to play. It was actually easier to play, I would argue, but you can perform a lot of diplomatic functions that you couldn't in Civilization 3 or 2. So the fact that you have to get resources still for your units is less of a problem. The resources are both more plentiful and easier to obtain through diplomacy. Another dimension is that you can have a diplomatic victory. So if you become the world leader under the United Nations mandate, you can gain a diplomatic victory, which means achieving many smaller diplomatic victories like nuclear disarmament and so on along the way. And a lot of that just has to do with power. It's cynical, like a lot of the ideas behind the Civilization series. Another thing, I'll see if I can find it here in the Wikipedia article. You can also achieve a religious victory, so maybe a more old-fashioned version of the diplomatic victory. That's something completely new because in the past, religion was just religion in the previous versions of Civilization. Whereas in Civilization 4, you actually have Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and so on. So you have the option of, or actually they give you the list here, Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and Taoism. So you can choose to have a state religion and promote that religion around the world, as well as your civic values. We look at the civics here. The civics are, that's annoying that it's hard to magnify. But the point is that your civics are more sophisticated than in any previous version of Civilization. And they are not down only to the form of government, and it's a little bit hard to roll back from certain kinds of governments. So if you have had a democracy for a long period of time, it's harder to actually roll back to monarchy or dictatorship or despotism. So better for your people, more difficult for you. As for other details, to get all of your units, you have to get the add-ons. So they actually aren't giving you good examples here. These are not the add-ons available on Steam, actually. I haven't tried any of these. I do have the Steam add-ons, so if we find them here, I just have to find it. They're making it hard to find. Here we go. So Beyond the Sword is one add-on. Warlords is another add-on. I actually have both of these. And they add the extra units like paratroopers, which were not previously extra, as well as a few more. You also can use the colonization add-on to convert it to a modernized version of Sid Meier's Colonization from the 1990s, if you don't want to use the old version of colonization. And then one other detail, your units and other people actually speak their own language in line with their historical civilization. So, in theory, the Romans would speak Latin, the Greeks would speak Greek, the Arabs would speak Arabic, and so on. That's an interesting little dimension. I guess we'll take a look at the Civilopedia now.